Malachi 2:15 records a command most married believers have never heard from a pulpit. Guard yourself in your spirit, and do not break faith with the wife of your youth. You have been sitting in church for decades, but has anyone ever said to you plainly, here is what God specifically forbids inside the marriage bed? Here is what it costs, and here is why that silence has been destroying Christian homes for a generation. That silence is what this video was built to end. There are 4 sexual sins God condemns inside marriage. Most believers have never heard all 4 named clearly from Scripture. The church has been too uncomfortable to say them, and the enemy has moved into the silence. By the time this video ends, you will know where the lines are, what breaks the covenant from the inside, and what God designed the marriage bed to be. We begin where the church should have begun long ago. Type, "I guard my marriage" in the comments right now. That is a covenant claim over the home God entrusted to you. Say it again, "I guard my marriage." Like this video, subscribe, and stay until the very end. The final section names what your children and grandchildren are carrying toward the altar, and every believer over 50 needs to see it. Sin 1. The marriage bed God called holy was never supposed to carry shame. Nobody told you what the wedding night was actually supposed to feel like. Not the pastor, not the Sunday school teacher, not the women who handed you a casserole at the bridal shower. You walked into that first night carrying a Bible in one hand and a lifetime of silence in the other, and the silence was louder. Genesis 2:25 does not whisper its verdict. The man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. God placed that sentence at the very end of the creation account, after he had called it very good, after he had built the covenant of marriage as the crown of his design. Nakedness without shame was not a condition that preceded the fall and then became irretrievable. It was the design. And God preserved it because he wanted every married believer in every generation to know it was real. Solomon understood this. He did not write the Song of Solomon as a collection of theological metaphors. He wrote it as a love letter, a husband pursuing his wife, a wife responding not with obligation but with longing. Song of Solomon 1:2 says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine." That is not the language of reluctant duty. That is the language of a woman who knows what God designed her to enjoy and is not ashamed to say it. God preserved every word of it. That was never an accident. Hebrews 13:4 draws the line that everything else in this message is built on. Marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure. That sentence does the opposite of what most believers were taught to hear in it. The instruction is not to be careful about the marriage bed. The instruction is to honor it, to keep it pure, meaning to protect it from what God forbids, not to treat it as something faintly shameful that a holy person merely tolerates. Pure does not mean empty, it means uncontaminated. The church confused those two things. It treated the silence as holiness, and a generation of married believers received that silence as a verdict. Your desire is a problem. Your body is a danger. The pleasure between you and your spouse is something to be managed rather than received. That was never what God said, and the cost of that confusion is still being paid in bedrooms across this country. What God actually forbids being brought into that sacred space requires naming plainly, because no one ever did. If you have not typed, "I guard my marriage" in the comments yet, do it right now. That declaration places a covenant claim over the home God entrusted to you. Again, I guard my marriage. Sin 2. The church taught you to fear what God called a gift. Religiosity did something to this generation that the enemy never could have done on his own. It walked into the bedroom of a Christian marriage, stood between a husband and a wife, and handed them both a verdict God never spoke. Your desire is a spiritual problem. Your body is a liability. What you feel for your spouse in the night is something to be confessed, not received. That theology did not come from Scripture. It came from men who were more frightened of the body than they were faithful to the full text of the Bible they claimed to preach. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 7:4 that the wife's body belongs not only to herself, but also to her husband. And likewise the husband's body belongs not only to himself, but also to his wife. Paul did not write that as a warning. He wrote it as a gift, a mutual belonging that runs in both directions, a reciprocity God built into the covenant itself. The church took that gift and turned it into a burden. It read the word belongs and heard only duty. It missed entirely that the same word, applied to both spouses equally, is the language of intimacy, not obligation. 1 Timothy 4:4 seals it, "For everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving." Paul wrote everything, no exception carved out for physical intimacy between a husband and wife. A generation of married believers sat in pews while a theology of exception was preached from pulpits, and they carried it home. They felt guilty for wanting their spouse. They spent decades managing a desire God intended them to receive. The enemy did not have to work very hard. The church had already done the damage. Ezekiel 34:4 records God's verdict against shepherds who did not strengthen the weak or bind up the injured. Leaders given charge over people who used that charge to burden rather than free them. A pastor who preaches shame where Scripture preaches gift is not a neutral figure. He has weakened the flock he was called to strengthen. The wound is real. The source is identifiable. Naming it plainly is not rebellion. It is exactly what God Himself did in Ezekiel 34. The silence was never holiness. The shame was never sanctification. It was a wound dressed in religious language. And what God forbids is not desire inside the covenant. What God forbids is a specific set of sins that have entered Christian marriages while the church was too uncomfortable to name them. Stay until the very end. The final section names exactly what your children and grandchildren are carrying toward the altar, and it is the most important thing in this video. Sin 3. The verse he quoted ended before he said it did. Proverbs 30:20 describes a woman who commits adultery, wipes her mouth, and says she has done nothing wrong. Solomon was not writing about a stranger. He was writing about someone so practiced in self-justification that wrong has stopped feeling like wrong. The verse could describe a man who has taken what was not freely given and called it his covenant right. A line is crossed, and the crossing is renamed. Scripture never gave a husband that rename. A man who demands what his wife does not freely give is not exercising covenant authority. He is violating the person God gave him charge to protect. And the verse he believes permits, it does not say what he thinks it says. Every time it gets quoted to justify force, it is being quoted the way Proverbs 30:20 describes: the mouth wiped clean, the act declared nothing, and Scripture bearing the weight of something it was never meant to carry. Ephesians 5:25 does not soften what follows. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That phrase, gave himself up, carries a weight the demand version of marriage cannot hold. Christ did not coerce the church into belonging to him. He laid his life down for her. The husband who uses force against the wife he was commanded to die for has not simply broken a law. He has turned the picture of the gospel inside out. Sacrifice replaced by seizure is not marriage. 1 Peter 3:7 names the standard with a word the church rarely preaches directly. Husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel. Honor, not demand, not claim. Honor, the word you use towards something sacred, something entrusted. something whose dignity is not negotiable, regardless of what a man believes the covenant permits him. A wedding ring is not a deed of ownership. That is not an opinion about gender or authority. It is an observation about what the covenant God designed actually is. Covenant was never built on force. It was built on love that chooses to serve, even when it costs everything. The moment force replaces love, the covenant does not become more binding. It becomes something else entirely. Marital rape is real. It is sin, and the silence around it in the church has not protected marriages. It has protected the sin inside them. Drop your first name and your city or country in the comments below. Whether you are watching from Dallas, from Canada, from South Africa, or anywhere else God has placed you, let the people around you know you are here. The next hidden danger does not announce itself with force. It arrives quietly, through a screen, with the door left open from the inside. Sin 4. Consent did not move the line that God drew first. There is a word that has been doing a great deal of work in this culture to make what God forbids sound like something else entirely. That word is consent. If two people agree, the argument goes, then the restriction no longer applies. The line moves with the people, and for a generation of believers who have watched the culture redefine nearly everything sacred, this argument has quietly found its way inside the church, not as theology, but as a conversation that nobody was willing to have out loud. Leviticus 18:20 does not include a consent clause. Do not have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife and defile yourself with her. The boundary God drew was not around secrecy or lack of agreement. It was around the person. Your neighbor's wife belongs to your neighbor's covenant. No arrangement between four willing adults rewrites what God wrote between two. The line is where God put it. It stays there. Genesis 2:24 describes the covenant bond in language that cannot be expanded by agreement. A man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh, one, not a rotating arrangement. Not a shared experience that four people consent to on a given evening. The word one is not a number that adjusts based on what adults negotiate. It is a description of what God creates when two lives are joined before Him. What He joins cannot be shared out. It can only be broken. The wound partner swapping leaves is not limited to the couple who tried it. Ephesians 5:31 through 32 names what is actually at stake. A man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Paul calls this a picture of Christ and the church. What happens inside a marriage is a living image of something eternal. A picture handed to strangers is no longer a picture of covenant. It is a picture of what the enemy designed to stand in covenant's place. The argument from consent sounds reasonable until it meets the weight of what God says the marriage covenant actually is. Then it collapses. What two people agree to cannot override what God declared, and what God declared is that this belongs to the two He joined, and to no one else. The Old Testament defense of this practice sounds more sophisticated, but it carries the same problem, and Scripture answers it directly. Stay until the final section. What is coming next goes deeper than any warning this video has named so far. Sin 5. The Old Testament defense leaves out what Jesus said next. Abraham had Hagar, Jacob had 4 women, David had wives and concubines, whose names fill a genealogy most readers skip. And the men who defend sexual threesomes inside Christian marriage go straight to that list. God used those men. God called Abraham His friend. God said David was a man after His own heart. So who is the church to say what those arrangements permitted? The argument sounds like biblical history. What it leaves out is the trail those arrangements left behind, and the moment Jesus arrived and drew a line that none of those patriarchs ever saw coming. Every case of multiple partners in the Old Testament carries a freight of consequence the argument never mentions. Hagar produced Ishmael, and the conflict between the two sons became a wound between nations that has not healed to this day. Jacob's four-woman household grew a jealousy so consuming that his sons threw their own brother into a pit and sold him to strangers. God worked through those situations. He never endorsed them. Scripture records the consequences precisely because they matter. The tolerance of a thing is not the same as the design of a thing. Then Jesus spoke. Matthew 19:4-5 does not soften its terms. Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh"? Jesus was not building a new argument. He was going back to the beginning, before the patriarchs, before the accommodations, before every arrangement that accumulated between Eden and the first century, and restating what God designed before human compromise ever entered the picture. 2, not 3, not an arrangement that expands when both parties consent. The person invited into a marriage as a third does not simply participate in a physical act. They fracture a covenant image God designed to reflect his own faithfulness to his people. Deuteronomy 17:17 forbade Israel's kings from multiplying wives, not because God was regulating palace logistics, but because he knew that a divided household produces a divided heart. What breaks in that room does not stay in that room. Jesus went back to the beginning, so no one could claim the Old Testament gave them permission. He answered the argument before anyone in this generation thought to make it. That answer is not complicated. 2, one flesh from the beginning. Sin 6. The screen did not stay outside when you let it in. Most men who first encountered pornography did not go looking for it. It found them. Through a link someone sent, through an image that appeared without warning, through a channel that led somewhere else before they realized where they were going. The first response was not a decision, it was a reaction. The decision came later, the decision to go back. That is the moment Scripture is most concerned about, not the first exposure, the return. Job made a covenant that most believers have never heard preached from a pulpit. Job 31:1 records it plainly. I have made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. Job did not say he had never seen something he should not have seen. He said he had made a decision in advance about what his eyes would do, a covenant with his own eyes. Before the temptation arrived, before the ordinary evening turned into a crossroads. That advanced decision is what gave him authority over the moment, and that moment will come, for every man, every time. Jesus named the mechanism in Matthew 5:28 with a precision that removes every qualification a man might insert. Anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. The screen does not change that standard. The distance does not change that standard. The fact that the image involves a stranger, not a neighbor's wife, does not change it. Jesus defined the transaction as what happens in the heart, and the heart does not distinguish between a person in the room and an image engineered to produce the same response. 1 Thessalonians 4:3-5 names the standard plainly. It is God's will that each of you be sanctified, that each of you know how to control his own body in holiness and honor, not in passionate lust like the pagans who do not know God. That phrase, control his own body, is not passive. It is a discipline, the same discipline Job was describing when he made a covenant with his eyes. God's will for a married believer is not only fidelity in the presence of the spouse, it is mastery of the body in the absence of the spouse. The man who cannot govern what his eyes do alone has already let something into the marriage his wife cannot see, but will eventually feel. The screen did not stay on the screen. It never does. What it builds inside the man who returns to it, that is where the real destruction begins. There is someone coming to your mind right now, a son or daughter, a grandchild, a friend whose marriage is quietly unraveling, who needs to hear that God designed the marriage bed as a sanctuary, not a source of shame. Share this video with them today, not with a lecture, just the link. Sin 7. What pornography built inside you was never on the screen. The most destructive thing pornography does is not visible during the act of consuming it. It happens afterward, quietly. In the space between the screen and the marriage bed, in the accumulation of images that never fully leave, in the gradual rewiring of what a man expects and what he can no longer receive without the artificial intensity the screen trained him to need. The damage is not a moment, it is a construction project. Romans 12:2 identifies the mechanism with a precision that makes the internet age feel ancient. Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The mind is the battlefield. And pornography is a systematic, repetitive assault on the mind designed to conform it to a pattern that is the direct opposite of everything God intended intimacy to be. It trains the mind to demand, to consume, to treat a person as a function rather than a covenant partner. And then it sends a man back into a real marriage, carrying expectations no real spouse was ever designed to satisfy. Proverbs 27:20 describes the nature of the trap with the precision of a man who has watched it destroy people. Death and destruction are never satisfied, and neither are human eyes. The appetite does not shrink the more it is fed. It grows, it escalates. What was sufficient last month is insufficient this month, and the wife on the other side of that escalating appetite is not competing with another person. She is competing with a system engineered to be inexhaustible, a fantasy designed to outpace any reality, constructed specifically to make the covenant she is offering feel inadequate by comparison. Samson did not lose his strength in one catastrophic moment of weakness. Judges 16 records a pattern, a man who returned to the same source of compromise. Across months, across conversations, across repeated warnings, his own spirit gave him that something was wrong. Each return made the next return easier. Each disclosure made the final one inevitable. The pattern is the thing Samson never recognized as a pattern, because inside the pattern, each individual choice felt separate and manageable. That is precisely how the enemy designed it to work. The spouse on the other side of pornography is not the cause of the marriage's weakness. The construction project is. Tear down what the screen built. The renewing of the mind does not happen by accident. It happens by decision, made before the ordinary evening turns into a crossroads, the same way Job made his. Sin 8. Adultery does not begin when the body moves. Every act of betrayal in a marriage has a history the betrayed spouse never got to read. It starts long before the phone call that ended everything, long before the night that cannot be taken back, long before a single physical step was taken towards someone who was not a covenant partner. It starts with something no one was watching, something that felt private, something that, in the moment, did not seem like a step at all. James 1:14 through 15 traces the progression with the precision of a physician who has seen this at every stage. Each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full-grown, gives birth to death. That sequence is not a metaphor, it is a map. Desire is dragged away first, pulled from its proper place before a single visible action occurs. The conception happens in private, the birth comes later in public, and by the time the public can see it, the private history is already years long. Proverbs 4:23 names the site of the battle before the battle becomes visible. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Not some things, everything. The marriage that collapses in year 32 did not begin collapsing in year 32. It began the day a thought was entertained instead of cut off. A glance was held instead of broken. A private conversation was allowed to continue. One exchange passed where it should have ended. The heart is where the flow begins. The flow does not reverse itself on its own. David did not walk onto that rooftop in 2 Samuel 11 planning to destroy his family. He was a king who had stayed home when he should have been at war. Idle at the hour when idleness most reliably becomes something worse. He looked. Then he sent someone to find out who she was. Then he sent for her. 3 decisions, each drawing on the momentum of the one before it. By the time the third was made, the first 2 had already written the ending. A marriage not actively guarded against the drift of unguarded moments is not standing still, it is moving. The look is never just a look, the thought is never just a thought. A marriage that cannot name where the drift began cannot stop the drift. The next section names what God designed that marriage to be, and why that design is the only thing strong enough to hold. Sin 9. God designed the marriage bed for more than you were told. The most counterintuitive truth in this entire message is not one of the warnings. It is this: God is more enthusiastic about the physical intimacy of a husband and wife than any married couple in this audience has ever been permitted to believe. That sentence will surprise people who were raised in churches where the subject was never addressed without a measure of discomfort, but the discomfort belonged to the preachers. It was never in the text. Song of Solomon 4:16 does not apologize for what it says. Let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits. That is a wife speaking openly, deliberately, using the language of invitation without shame. God included that sentence in the canon of inspired scripture. He did not file it under necessary but uncomfortable. He filed it under very good, alongside every other thing he made on the 6th day. Proverbs 5:18 through 19 goes further than most believers have ever heard preached from a pulpit. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. May you ever be intoxicated with her love. That word intoxicated was not chosen carelessly. God was not describing a mild appreciation between 2 people who have learned to tolerate each other well. He was describing a deep, consuming delight, the kind a husband was actively prescribed to pursue inside the covenant, not permitted, prescribed. 1 Corinthians 7:3 uses a word the translation often softens into something easier to sit with. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The word behind duty carries the weight of a debt freely owed, not a reluctant concession dragged out of obligation, but a responsibility carried joyfully because the other person's flourishing matters more than personal comfort or convenience. 3 purposes. God designed physical intimacy to unite, a bond that goes deeper than words or shared history. To protect, guarding the covenant from the vulnerabilities that isolation and deprivation create, closing the doors the enemy looks for in marriages that have stopped being tended. And to reflect, however imperfectly, the faithful, exclusive, self-giving love that Christ has for his church. That is not a minefield to navigate, that is a sanctuary to inhabit. The generation walking toward that sanctuary right now has never once been shown what it is, and that is not their failure, it is ours. Sin 10. The generation heading to the altar was formed without you. There is a generation standing at the edge of marriage right now that has never been handed a biblical picture of what the covenant they are about to enter actually means. They were handed something else instead: pornography before they understood what intimacy was, hookup culture before they understood what commitment was. A redefined version of love that asks nothing, sacrifices nothing, and walks away when the cost becomes inconvenient. And they are carrying all of it toward an altar designed to hold something more sacred than what culture prepared them to bring. Deuteronomy 6:7 never placed that responsibility on a pulpit. It placed it on the people who lived inside the home. These commandments are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. God designed truth to travel through relationship, through conversations at kitchen tables and on long drives, in ordinary moments when someone chooses to say the hard thing instead of the comfortable one. The silence in those moments was never neutral. It was formation, and in the absence of one voice, another voice filled the space. Hosea 4:6 does not soften the verdict. My people are destroyed from lack of knowledge, not from lack of sincerity. Not from lack of church attendance, from lack of knowledge. The destruction inside young marriages today is not mysterious. It is predictable. It is the exact harvest a generation produces when the people who knew the truth decided the conversation was too uncomfortable to begin. Eli understood the cost of that silence personally. In 1 Samuel 2, his sons were desecrating the priesthood with open contempt, and Eli knew. He spoke to them once, mildly, and then let it continue. 1 Samuel 3:13 records God's verdict. He did not restrain them. Not that he did not know, not that he did not care, he did not restrain them. Knowing without acting produced the same consequence as not knowing at all. The generation walking toward the altar right now does not need one more voice telling them love is a feeling. It needs someone who has buried a spouse and kept the vows, someone who has survived a season that would have ended the marriage and chose to stay. Someone whose covenant has been tested by decades and is still standing. That person is not a pastor on a stage. That person is watching this video. The silence ends here, and the only person who can end it is you. There will come a moment, not in the bedroom, not in the argument nobody else ever knew about, but in a stillness beyond anything this life contains, when every choice made inside your covenant will be fully visible before God. 2 Corinthians 5:10 does not soften this. We must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ to receive what is due for the things done while in the body, not what was announced, the things actually done, what happened behind closed doors. That moment is not a threat. It is the weight that makes this video matter. What you do with what you receive today is the question. Not what you believed, not what you intended. What you do now, in the marriage, you are still inside. With the generation, you are still influencing. Subscribe to Bible Wisdom Spirit and watch the videos waiting for you next. This channel says what the pulpit left out, because those who love God most deserve to finish well.